Welcome everyone. Glad to see you on my channel. Today I will tell you about an unusual story, an amazing story about companionship and love. I wish you a pleasant audience.
A janitor suddenly arrived with a bucket and helped the teacher from there. A bad groom paves the way for a good one, my grandmother used to say. What does that mean? Frowned 13-year-old Sarah. And that means that if some poor groom appears on the horizon, in a little while you will wait for your real soulmate, explained Grandma Betty with a smile. It's a folk omen. Did you have it like that too? My granddaughter asked curiously. She smiled slyly, and her eyes suddenly became surprisingly young. I remember in the post-war years, there were not many suitors, so Evan decided to hit on me. He was small, ugly, crooked-legged, with a hare's lip and snot running out of his nose all the time. The girl grimaced. Yep, nodded Grandma with a smile, but my parents said, Betty, don't throw it away. Even though he's a bad one, he's his own. Such a one won't go for a walk. One evening I came to the dance in a new dress, a beautiful red dress with large polka dots and a white lace headscarf, and Evan was walking behind me. Sarah imagined the stately beauty from the old photos walking proudly down the street, with the little snotty mess behind her, and laughed out loud. My grandmother continued her story, and there were nostalgic notes in her voice. Oh, she was good. Betty shook her head, as if thinking of something of her own. That day, the boys from the neighboring village came to visit, and Evan started bragging about my fiancé. The guys praise and envy Evan, and one of them looks at me seriously. And when I looked at him more closely, I realized that's him. And then they announced the white dance. So I was a fool, and I asked them to do it. So what? The granddaughter asked with a smile. What do you mean, what? Thank God. 62 years together and 7 children. Betty laughed. So it was Grandpa? Gasped Sarah. Who else would it be? The old woman chuckled cheerfully. It just so happened that Evan had led me to the real fiancé. Who knows? If he'd kept quiet, no one would have noticed me. He made it worse for himself. You know, Grams, I kind of feel sorry for him. And for nothing. Soon Evan found another bride and got married. But he's not very handsome. First, the whole village went to our wedding, then to Evan's. That's the story. The grandparents were in their 80s, but neither Betty nor Barry was over 60, or even less. Sarah's father was the youngest son of the couple. Alexander had come into the world when his parents were in their 40s. Both, laughing, said that the secret of their youth was love. What is true is true. The two elderly people were very reverent towards each other, and the girl sometimes thought that if one of them left this world, the other would not stay in it for long. For as long as Sarah remembered her grandparents, they had almost never parted. Recently, Betty had been in the hospital, and Grandpa had been there day and night. He brought his wife not only pureed soups and fruit, but also bouquets of flowers. Doctors loved this loving, cheerful couple and well envied them. Here it is, swan fidelity, thought the attending physician, when he entered the ward and saw a touching picture. Vasily Yakovlevich held his wife's hand and gently stroked it. Sarah, who was also there, felt incredibly proud. The girl often dreamed that she would make a husband as caring as her grandfather. Only with a small correction. Sarah did not want any bad, but his suitors. She, a tonight girl, really wanted to make a love that would be the one and only. After all, that's what happens too, thought Sarah. However, ironically, the omen worked in the case of her granddaughter. In the Pedagogical Institute, where Sarah and her school friend Angelica entered after school, with grooms were not abundant. 1, 2, and a few, and those were just a few. In a word, nothing. Yes, the Pedagogical Institute was definitely not the place to make a cool guy, Angelica said. But who says we can't make him somewhere else? After the first scholarship, the friends decided to go to a bar, where they met some medical students. They chatted about everything in the world and stayed up late. After those parties, Angelica started dating Harry, Sarah with Stephen, but alas, without much love. After a month, it became clear that nothing would come of the relationship. "You're wonderful," Sarah said, "but I guess fate has prepared you and me for the other half. I'm sorry." "Well, I guess you're right," sighed Constantine. He realized that the relationship wasn't working out, and there was no point in torturing himself and each other. Hitting acquaintance for company is not the best option at all. If a spark ran between two people, it did not mean that the same thing happened to the others. "Good luck to you," Sarah said. "You're bound to meet someone who will love you with all her heart. You're really cool, aren't you?" "I can tell you the same thing," Stephen smiled, and they hugged warmly. That's it. No more dating for dating's sake, the girl decided, watching Stephen until he was out of sight. Sarah remembered her grandmother, who had already passed away a year ago, taking her grandfather with her. The girl was right. Without her adored wife, Barry's life had lost all meaning. After Betty's 40th birthday, her grandfather passed away quietly in his sleep. Betty's soul had left this world, so he was sad. Their neighbor Katie whispered and crossed herself. The kingdom of heaven. So, if you believe the omen, Stephen is the bad fiancé who will lead me to the real one, thought Sarah. Is Stephen a bad guy? No, he's a good guy. He's just not right for us. But Grandma never said he had to be bad. Oh, how she missed her grandmother. Sarah would come to Grandma Betty's house, and they would take their time and discuss matters of the heart over a cup of fragrant tea on raspberry twigs. The grandparents had left Sarah their apartment. The girl entered the inheritance, but the apartment has not yet moved in because of the delayed repair. Yes, and dreary there without old people. Relations with her mother were trusting, but unfortunately, Nancy was not up to heart-to-heart talks. Sarah's parents, successful doctors, were always traveling, and now, when she came home sad and wanted to talk, Alexander and Nancy had left for another conference. "What are you, like a nun?" rolled his eyes Angelica. "Well, you did not work out with Stephen, but life is not over." "No, it's not over," Sarah confirmed with a smile. "But does that mean I have to throw myself into the arms of the first man I meet?" "Well, why the first guy you meet?" exclaimed her friend. "There are plenty of good-looking guys, but you don't notice them." "Maybe that's why I don't notice that there's no one I'd be willing to live with for the rest of my life," Sarah said thoughtfully. "You only super-duper macho of your dreams do not say that," Angelica giggled, "or he'll immediately give a shout." The girl only shrugged her shoulders. "Why would I tell him that? If it's fate, he won't run away." "I'd look at you, Sarah, and I do not understand whether you still have youthful maximalism has not yet outlived itself, or you have invented an ideal image of yourself. I just don't want to change. Yeah, I ignore guys I'm not interested in. But who does that hurt? Them. Not in my experience, no. Myself. But you have to admit, I'm the only one who knows what's better or worse for me. And sleeping together and breaking up is not for me. Neither is a relationship based on the principle of just to be had. That's the way I was born, and I'm not going to be any different." "Yeah, I guess so," Angelica agreed. "You're right. I'm sorry." "It's nothing," smiled her friend. The 5 years of her college years flew by in a whirlwind, and Sarah's personal life didn't change. She went to parties, honestly tried to look at possible candidates for boyfriends, but alas, tonight girl never met him. Further than innocent flirting relationships with guys did not progress. "Well, that's all right," Nancy reassured her daughter. "If you're unlucky in love, you'll be lucky in your career." "Oh yeah, my mum was good at that. She was a career woman. Still, Mom's happy." "Don't worry," Nancy smiled, taking her daughter's hand in hers. "You'll see. We'll have a lot more fun at your wedding." "I'm not worried," Sarah replied and smiled too. "No, really. Marriage is not an end in itself. I just want to be loved." "You will." The ringing of Nancy's cell phone broke the idyll. This is how it always is, the girl thought with disappointment. However, Sarah had no time to dream about a big and bright love. She was more concerned with the question of employment, but fortunately, it was solved rather quickly. A good friend of Nancy's worked as a head teacher at a school that needed an elementary school teacher. The woman put in a good word for Sarah, and on the 1st of September, dressed in a new satin dress the color of iris, went to work. A graduate of the Pedagogical Institute and the first class entrusted to her were new, and it was incredibly exciting. Having listened to horror stories about disrespectful teachers and wild antics of students, Sarah was afraid. There was a class period coming up, and the young professional's knees were trembling. She was wearing high stiletto shoes, and the girl was seriously afraid of falling on the way to class, or right in front of the students. What a laugh, thought Sarah, as if her fall was a done deal. But the fear was in vain. Everything went well. "Sarah, you're very pretty," said a pretty, russet-haired girl with a puffy bow on top of her head. "Thank you," she smiled. A compliment from one of the mentees cheered her up. Sarah, feeling more confident, said, "Guys, parents, stay together. Everybody follow me. My name is Sarah," she said affably, and suddenly, to her embarrassment, she realized she didn't know what to say next. But when Sarah saw the smiles of the parents of the first graders, mostly moms, the shame and fear went away. And she continued in a more confident voice, "Perhaps you have some questions. Don't hesitate to ask." The class hour was held in a friendly atmosphere. "You are a very nice woman," one of the moms said with a smile, and the newly appointed teacher smiled warmly at the young woman. "I'll try not to betray your trust," Sarah replied. A meeting with a ceremonial bent was held after the class hour. "Dear colleagues, congratulations to everyone on Knowledge Day," said the school principal Selena, a pretty brunette of about 45 years old, with kind, shrewd eyes. "Besides, I would like to introduce you to a new employee. Meet Sarah. Sarah, please love and welcome." The director gestured lightly at her, and then each staff member said his or her first name and middle name. Sarah felt embarrassed for some reason, and immediately became angry with herself. How much embarrassment can I take? I'm a grown woman, a teacher, after all. She stood up gracefully and looked around the staff with a smile and said, "Nice to meet you. I hope we get along well." Sarah took a quick glance around the group and noted the friendly looks, except for two. The first was the evaluating and, oh God, oily stare of a young man a little older than her, of sturdy athletic build. Probably a gym teacher, Sarah guessed. Quite handsome, by the way. The second look was openly hostile. When she met eyes with a platinum, brightly painted blonde from the same age group, Sarah immediately realized that she had to keep her eyes open. Otherwise, there would be trouble. Her co-workers cheered Sarah up, laughing, joking, and she sat there as if frozen. And all those two. Sarah, not being stupid, instantly realized that the blonde was jealous. Maybe there was something between them, or maybe there was, or the blonde co-worker is counting on it. Who cares? She thought deeply. I came here to work, not to have affairs. So, let the girl sleep in peace. And then the gym teacher furtively winked at Sarah, quite meaningfully, I must say. She defiantly turned away, and it didn't escape the blonde, who immediately frowned. What a Santa Barbara! She grinned to herself. And I seemed to be at the epicenter of this outrage. After the meeting, the principal invited everyone to the dining room, where a fancy table and a corporate party at midnight awaited the teachers. Thankfully, the next day was Sunday. Sarah got to know all her colleagues and had a drink with some of them. "I'm always happy to see new young employees," said a tipsy Selena with a smile. "No, really. Unfortunately, young specialists willing to work in an ordinary secondary school are very rare today. And you, young, beautiful, and the Institute spoke well of you. That's good. A spect who hasn't even started working yet opens her mouth. Well, nothing. She thought vindictively. We'll see who's who. In war as in war. The teacher's work began. Sarah loved her students, and they reciprocated. The realization that she was sowing reason, goodness, and eternity filled Sarah's soul with pride. She enjoyed the process of learning and loved to go for walks with the class. During one of these outings, Sarah came up with the idea of having a tea party. It was a great way to get to know not only the students, but also their parents. Guys, she called to the class with a smile, "Come to me, everyone." The kids flocked to their favorite teacher in a flash, and Sarah suddenly compared herself to a hen's hen. What an association, she teased herself. "Guys, I have an idea," Sarah announced solemnly. "What's the idea, Sarah?" The first graders are chattering away. "Why don't we discuss this in class?" "No," they protested in unison. "Well, all right, the teacher gave up. "I'll tell you my idea, and then we'll go to class. Okay?" "Yes," the children exclaimed joyfully. They reached the public garden near the school and sat down on the benches next to a long table. In summer, this place was a favorite with school children, students, and local alcoholics. "Okay, guys," Sarah started. "I'd like to suggest that you have a tea party. We'll bring tea from home, and whoever we can cookies, sweets, scones, and have a feast for the whole world. How about that?" "Great," Anna exclaimed. "My mom is going to bake a cake." "Such a big cake. Chocolate." "Well, if your mom has time, of course," Sarah said. "She's probably working." "Mommy bakes cakes to order," said the girl proudly. "They are so beautiful. You've never seen them like this." "That would be interesting to see," smiled the class teacher. "And my grandmother makes delicious rolls," Vanya Sinitsin said importantly. "Better than in the store, really true." "Well, that's great," Sarah said approvingly. "I'd love to try your grandmother's rolls. And my mom makes scones. And my grandmother. And my mom's." There wasn't much time left before the end of the environmental lesson, which was the purpose of the walk. So Sarah didn't have a chance to listen to everyone. The teacher raised her right hand up and said, "Guys, I would love to appreciate the culinary talents of your mothers and grandmothers, but we have to get back to school. I'd also need to coordinate with your parents." The first graders went to school without complaint. All the children, except for one student, were in high spirits. Cindy walked behind the rest of the class and frowned. "Cindy, why are you so sad?" Sarah asked. "And I have no one to bake scones or cake," the little girl replied, and her lips trembled. "What's the matter?" the class teacher asked affectionately. "I don't have a mommy, and my grandmother is always busy," the girl sighed. "Daddy says that mommy lives in the sky now, but I know she's gone. I don't remember her." Sarah's heart ached. She was good. As a good teacher, she should have seen this coming and stopped her students from bragging. In fact, she had a not very pleasant, but it seemed correct question to herself. Didn't I hurry up with the tea party? After all, the parents of the students could be busy at work. It's one thing for a retired grandmother who can bake rolls all day long, and quite another for a tired, exhausted mother. She certainly doesn't have time for baking. Not to mention this poor girl. "My poor baby," Sarah said pityingly. "Life goes on as an adult," Cindy replied. "Yes, of course." After lessons, teachers gathered in the teachers' lounge. The teachers reported to the management about incidents and other costs of a hard-working day of a Russian teacher. "Dear colleagues," having gathered her courage, Sarah spoke up. "I think I've done something very stupid today." "Well," Selena said, tapping her fingers on the table, "and what's so stupid? Maybe it's not so bad." "I don't know," the girl admitted and told me about her idea. "That's a great idea," Victoria said sarcastically. She herself, like Sarah, was an elementary school teacher and was not particularly proactive. But it would be a good idea to discuss it with the administration, not with the first graders, who were now waiting for the tea party. "I thought I said I was having doubts," Sarah replied, glaring at her coworker. "And now I'm asking for advice from the team." Actually, the tea party itself isn't a bad idea, the gym teacher said, and was immediately rewarded with a scathing glare from Victoria. "Why? It's a great way to bond with the guys and gain cheap credibility," Victoria venomously interjected. "So cheap authority," Maria, the historian, snorted. "In Soviet times, tea parties were the norm, and no one thought of cheap authority." "That's right," nodded the principal. "But we should not forget that times change and dictate their own rules." Victoria had mentioned cheap authority, and in a way she was right. After all, it's possible that there will be parents who will think the same thing. And from a financial point of view, have you seen the prices of groceries? So parents may not feel the same way about this idea as they did before. Sarah blushed deeply and lowered her head, but Victoria's gaze flashed with triumph. "But not for long." No, Sarah, I don't suspect you of any such thing," the principal hastened to reassure me. "I know you acted in good faith." "So what now? Do we cancel the tea party?" Sarah asked in a low voice. "Well, why not?" Selena replied with a kind smile. "The children are waiting. It's great that you have ideas, but in the future I would ask you to discuss them with me. And of course, it would be a good idea to consult with your parents. And then you can present them to the students." "Yes, of course," smiled the girl. "Thank you, Selena." "You're welcome," she smiled back. "What else is a manual for? You are a new person, and you still have a lot to learn. Any other questions, dear colleagues?" No one had any questions, and the teachers began to go home. Victoria was furious. Sarah put on her favorite cream-colored raincoat, slipped into her high, low-heeled boots, and walked out of the teacher's lounge with one last glance in the mirror. Victoria was standing in the hallway, clearly waiting for someone. "Did you get off easy, you little pigeon?" she asked snidely, blocking Sarah's path. "Let me pass," she threw, glaring at Victoria as if she were nothing. She wanted to say something, but John appeared in the hallway. Victoria, forgetting about her rival, went on the offensive. Sarah grinned and went outside. The young teacher walked down the alley, inhaling the spicy scents of autumn and admiring the bright colors of the season. "Sarah," she heard it. Turning around, the girl saw the gym teacher. John was running toward her, not walking but running. "God, what does he want from me?" Sarah thought wistfully. "This wouldn't happen to be yours, would it?" John asked and pulled a chiffon scarf out of his pocket. "Mine," she said, embarrassed. "How did I do that?" "The wind blew it away," my colleague smiled. "I saw it with my own eyes and shouted at you for 10 minutes. And you didn't respond." "Yeah, I guess so," nodded Sarah. "I was just thinking." "Yeah, thank you. How about a kiss?" The girl gave John a look that made him shiver, and he hurriedly raised his hands in surrender. "A joke," he said. "However, I am quite serious about walking you home." "Aren't you afraid?" grinned Sarah. "What? Or who? Do we have a jealous husband?" "No," she shook her head. "No jealous husband, but I'd seen enough jealous friends in 3 weeks." "You mean Victoria?" "Well, who else? Or is there another friend at school?" "That's up to you," John replied with a hint of innuendo. "Sarah, I'm not going to beat around the bush. I like you very much, and I don't need to hide it. As for Victoria, I didn't swear my love to her, and I didn't promise her anything. If she's making up stuff for herself, that's not my problem. Anyway, I'm very hungry, and there's a small but cozy cafe nearby. It's almost a restaurant." "Well, then go to your cafe restaurant," snickered Sarah, "and I should get home." "Is your husband waiting for you?" John asked, and then answered himself in the affirmative. "Of course he is. People like you, everything is just as it should be. First the studies, then marriage to a long-time boyfriend, and not because of love, but because it's the way it should be. Well, and then delicious, nutritious, and of course, healthy breakfast in the morning, borscht, cuddles, picnics on weekends. Sarah was suddenly amused by this conversation, and she added with a chuckle, "You forgot the swaddling clothes." "No, I haven't forgotten." The gym teacher shook his head with a smile. "I just don't think it's come to that yet. You're obviously not the kind of person who jumps out of a marriage as a student and goes on sabbatical due to an impending addition to the family. Everything's under control, everything's on track." "You seemed hungry," remarked Sarah. "So enjoy your meal and have a good weekend." Sarah rode in the shuttle bus and digested John's inferences. He really believes what he said, she thought. Some people think they're great psychologists, but I wonder where he gets his conclusions from. When the next day Sarah told Angelica, who had been lucky enough to get a teaching job at a prestigious high school, she shrugged her shoulders. "And you know, there's nothing surprising about it," the friend gave her verdict. "Why is that?" Sarah wondered. "Because you look like this super right beautiful smarty pants who has her life planned out to the minute." "I have nothing planned," she sighed. School home, school home." "So your gym teacher flattered you a lot." Angelica grinned, but otherwise he was right. "By the way, do you like him even a little?" Angelica: "Okay, I see. What am I talking about? Let's keep talking. You have that 'I'm so predictable and my life is just like that' look on your face. Is that a bad thing?" No. But you know, you could use a little pepper." "Sarah, but you're supposed to be young and have a lot to remember." "What are you gonna remember?" "Work." Sarah couldn't find anything to say, and Angelica took advantage of her confusion and said, "All right, we're going to the biker club tonight. No objections." "Where to where?" Sarah was stunned. "To the biker club," Angelica eagerly repeated. "It's really cool there." "But it's not like I'm a biker." "So did I. So there are such awesome parties and photo shoots there. And there's a photo shoot there today," winked a friend. Sarah stared at her friend in amazement, opening and closing her mouth, reminding her of a beached fish. "And what are we looking at?" Angelica grinned and looked at her watch. "We still have time to go to Stiliaga for a leather outfit." "Where am I gonna get the money for a leather outfit?" "Okay, eco leather is even more spectacular. Like, tight tights." "Well, what do you want?" "You can't go in a teacher's outfit." "Maybe we shouldn't." Sarah made a timid attempt to dissociate herself from this madness. We must. Angelica said resolutely. "Shall we go to Stiliaga?" "Let's go." Sarah nodded dejectedly and thought, what the hell? When you think about it, I really don't have anything to remember. And I'm already 23. Sweet, exclaimed Angelica, looking at her friend, dressed in a stylish kosuma and a short, slightly flared skirt made of eco-leather, decorated with deceptive locks imitating pockets. The biker look was completed with boots and tights with a mesh pattern. Wasn't that a little bold? Sarah asked apprehensively. What's with the habit of shitting all over the raspberries? It's great, and don't argue. Mother, Nancy exclaimed in amazement when she saw her daughter dressed like a biker's girlfriend. Where do you think you're going? And we, Aunt Nancy, are going to a biker club, replied Angelica cheerfully. The woman's eyebrows slowly but surely cracked upward. Her homebody daughter was going to a biker club. It's unbelievable. Mom, don't you like it? Sarah asked, secretly hoping her parent didn't approve of her new look. You don't like it? Mother marveled. I've always wanted you to wear something like that. Sarah, it's cool. Really? She asked incredulously and looked at her mother carefully, thinking she had been drinking, but it was nothing of the sort. Why not? Angelica said admonishingly. You must obey your mother. Sarah only shook her head, deciding that what was happening was akin to mass insanity. Did her mom like the way she was dressed? Holy shit, it was Kafka all over again. The friends took a cab to a garage on the outskirts of town, and Angelica told the driver, Okay, now turn right and all the way to the end. They pulled up in front of what looked like an auto repair shop or a basement. More like the second, Sarah summarized. When the girls paid the cab driver, Angelica led her friend down the stairs and finally pressed the call button. "Who is knocking at my door?" A male voice with a Caucasian accent was heard. "They are their own," Angelica said with a laugh, and the door swung open, making Sarah hurriedly jump aside. The girls entered the room, and a handsome, tall, blonde man, who had nothing to do with Caucasian nationality, came out to meet them. Nor did he have anything to do with Caucasians. "Hi, Cindy." The blonde smiled. "Hi, Chippy." Angelica greeted him, after which they hugged each other heartily. "At least introduce her to her girlfriend," the guy said jokingly. "My friend's name is Sarah. No pseudonym yet due to my forgetfulness." A pseudonym of some sort, she thought perplexedly. "Kindergarten." "Chippy." The blonde man introduced himself, bowing slightly to Sarah. "Pleasure," the girl said hesitantly, and Angelica drew her away, dropping her. "Chippy, we'll talk again." The friends walked on. The club had a bar, billiards, and even a nice sauna with a swimming pool. "How do you like it here?" Angelica asked. "I don't know yet," Sarah admitted, "but it's atmospheric." "What's behind the curtain?" "And this is kind of like a photo booth. Then we'll take a picture of you in front of some cooler iron horse." Angelica introduced Sarah to the new inhabitants of the club, who appeared like mushrooms after the rain. Sarah was introduced to the club's new inhabitants, who appeared from somewhere like mushrooms after the rain. "How do you memorize them all?" Sarah muttered. "Don't worry about it," snorted her friend. "Of course, you won't be able to remember anyone the first time, but you don't have to. Everything will be remembered later." There were not only young guys and girls here, but also older men, as Angelica whispered respectfully, old school bikers, that were all smiling, and Sarah realized that it was really nice to be here. The doorbell rang. Sarah couldn't believe her eyes when she saw the newcomer, a group of 5 tough guys. "Angelica, pinch me," she muttered, shocked. "What is it?" But Sarah was speechless, and with good reason. Because one of the big guys was none other than John, Sarah's co-worker. In person? Yeah. When she finally found the ability to speak intelligibly and told her friend about it, she laughed. "What is it?" Sarah repeated her friend's question. "Because my star, he was hitting on me too." "Why am I not surprised?" "Well, why are you?" "It's okay." She waved her hand. "I've never been attracted to the prospect of being one of many, and I told him as much. Besides, I have a tender love affair with Chippy." "So you're with him?" "Yeah, well, what's the big deal?" "But you're an educator," Sarah replied with a slight hesitation. "I'm begging you." "Sarah, have you fallen off the moon?" "I'm a teacher. Yes, I'm a teacher. But not a nun, right? And in general, I am a teacher at my lyceum, and here I am a young, cool girl. Like you, by the way." "I don't know." Seeing John walking toward them, Sarah tensed. "Calm down, old lady," Angelica said encouragingly. "This is the fun part." Sarah didn't feel that way. In fact, she suddenly wanted to get the hell out of here, as soon as possible. She'd had enough excitement, not all at once. "Hi," John said, looking at Sarah appraisingly. "Hi," Angelica smiled. "Are you with a friend tonight? Introduce me." She shrugged, and Sarah realized that John hadn't recognized her. That was what made her feel like the boss of the situation. That felt pretty damn good. "Do we really know each other?" He turned to Sarah, smiling through all 32 teeth. "Well, of course," she smiled. "John, what's the matter with you?" "I'm Sarah, your colleague, the one you wanted to invite to the cafe just yesterday." "Sarah?" The PE teacher asked in amazement, gazing into her face. Well, yeah. Just, makeup. Well, and stuff." John was funny to look at. I just don't know why he was so confused. Was it because he didn't recognize Sarah? Or was it the fact that she had come here at all? Or maybe John wasn't used to seeing a coworker in such informal attire. Probably all together, Sarah suggested. But she seemed to be wrong. "Sarah, you're amazing," John purred, pulling himself together. "But you know, guys, there's a girl coming over here right now." "No, don't get me wrong. It's nothing serious. She's the one who thinks we're a couple." "It's okay. It happens," Sarah replied condescendingly. "It's a mundane matter," Angelica added mockingly. "Yeah," John nodded, and then his cell phone rang. Apologizing to his girlfriends, the hapless boss stepped aside and started the conversation. Judging by his smile, it was a pleasant one. "What was that?" Angelica laughed as the girls moved a respectful distance away. "Apparently, our shooter wants to keep up with everything," Sarah shrugged with a smile. "Looks like it." My mood suddenly lifted, and there was no trace of the desire to leave this place as soon as possible. "Len, did you say something about a pavilion for a photo shoot?" She smiled, "But is it realistic to take a picture now?" "You bet." The girlfriends were filmed against a backdrop of motorcycles, a brick wall, a curtain, alone, in the arms of the most beautiful and brutal bikers. Sarah enjoyed herself immensely. And then there was the sauna, the pool, and soulful lounging at the bar. John, who, as it turned out, was known as Jenny, was nowhere to be found. The girls didn't want his company at all. It was after midnight when we got home. "Did you like it?" Angelica asked, no longer doubting the answer. "Very much so." "Oh, and you didn't want to go?" Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. "Well, I like this girl," confessed John to his best friend Tony, but so foolishly screwed up. John loved the biker club. It was almost the only place in the world where he could be himself to the fullest. That is, not as a teacher, but as a tough guy who could not resist any girl. In the club, it was possible to seduce an unburdened pretty girl and have a great time. But this time, as they say, something went wrong. But who would have thought that the woman John had been dreaming about for 3 weeks would be there? And he had a date with someone else. In fact, John could have sent the lady away and taken care of Sarah away from the staff. But the club doesn't honor that kind of behavior. As a result, the amorous gym teacher had a good time, and now he could not rest. What will Sarah think of me? And anyway, how to win her over? What's the big deal? Tony shrugged perplexedly. Well, you were hitting on her friend. There was nothing going on between you two. So you went out with someone else and... Well, what's she gonna think of me? She won't think anything special. It's exactly what it is. John's a real piece of work. Why? A walker means he's in demand. I'm afraid it's not something that can entice our Sarah. With an ironic smile shook his head that still Walker, to me her friend that in our party Cindy, gave out that she is not interested in being one of many. She's a liberated girl though, and with Sarah, there's no chance. Tony whistled. I don't recognize you, buddy. You haven't actually made any serious attempts to win this, Sarah of yours, and you're already ready to give up. Where's your ingenuity? And is that even you? I do, John sighed, but I guess I've been easy prey so far, and considering my friend, too easy. Teachers, the friend waved his hands. But. John jokingly wagged his finger. Aren't you saying that all teachers are prudes? By the way, your humble servant, if you remember, is also a teacher. Well, think of Victoria. Didn't take much convincing there. You compared too. She's in love with you like a cat. You don't count either. We men are all womanizers. Some more than others, some less, whether you're a teacher or a tractor driver. Well, and women teachers are not that prudes. But, in short, here you need a special approach. I know that without you, John said with a sigh, but the question is, how do I find him? You'd have to know her weaknesses at the very least. Good thinking, Tony nodded approvingly. Well, it's gonna take time to learn all this stuff, isn't it? Are you in a hurry? Said his friend with a chuckle. What a way to put it. You know what happens. I like a girl. and I think she's special. She dynamites you, and that only makes it worse. Well, she's special. You're willing to wait as long as you want, and now you've finally waited. You splurge. You give her a big romance, but you feel nothing but disappointment. You know why? Because it turns out she's not special at all. No, it's much simpler than that. Tony muttered slowly. There's just no chemistry. Not your girl, that's all. Who the hell is special? We're all ordinary Homo sapiens, just each of us with our own weaknesses. And weaknesses can be played on. But if you're so desperate, I can tell you a universal way. Now, don't be long. John was intrigued. Women have always loved a hero, so be one. Oh yeah, how am I supposed to become one? Well, how? Tony furrowed his brow, like saving your girlfriend in an extreme situation. In what other extreme situation? Snorted John skeptically. I might as well wait for Sarah to mature, and there's still no telling what will happen ahead. So create that situation and be done with it. I don't mean pull her out of a burning house or rescue her when she's drowning. But saving her from bullies is very realistic. John said thoughtfully. There's something about that, and I think I even know how to do it. Sarah had never liked Mondays. She was one of the people for whom that day of the week was really hard. When Sarah was at school and then at the institute, she would come home tired and exhausted and immediately go to bed. The lethargy receded by evening, but the feeling that she was unloading railcars did not leave Sarah until Tuesday morning. This Monday promised to be doubly hard, but strangely enough, the girl felt invigorated and rested. It turned out that she could be different too. It gave Sarah more energy than any energy drinker. The young teacher had to ask in the parent chat room what moms and dads thought about organizing a tea party. Since Friday night, Sarah had repeatedly picked up her smartphone and tried to write, but each time she deleted the message and hated herself. She understood, of course, when the task was over, it was easier, but she couldn't help it. It was easy on its own, but when Sarah thought of the director's words, she felt uneasy. And on Monday, on her way to school, a simple but true thought occurred to her. Why am I agonizing? It's up to me to offer, and then it's up to me. They won't hit me in the forehead. Sarah, when is the tea party? Vanya Sinitsin asked, as soon as she entered the classroom. This question is being solved, the girl smiled, and when the first graders were busy writing, she took a gadget and typed the pressing question lightning fast. For 30 minutes, no one answered. Sarah put her phone on silent mode and forgot about the chat so she wouldn't be nervous. When the call rang, she started to look through the messages and was pleasantly surprised. Her parents loved her idea. Cool idea, wrote Samantha. The message was followed by several different emoticons. Why didn't you offer right away? Selena, Anna's mother, was puzzled, judging by the smiley face. I bake cakes to order, but for such an occasion, I'm ready to treat everyone for free. I, though a man, will gladly contribute as much as I can to a good cause, assured Mickey. Sarah remembered Cindy's sad eyes as the children talked excitedly about their mothers' and grandmother's culinary talents. Then she told her that her mom was gone. Sarah clicked on Mickey's profile and saw a young man with kind eyes and a slightly sad smile. It's easier to get over the loss of mom with a father like that, she thought, though of course no one can replace mom. Waking up from her thoughts, Sarah wrote, "Very good. Let's discuss this matter in more detail. Maybe we should get together at a time that is convenient for you." In the end, they agreed to meet on Wednesday. The negotiations went well, and on Thursday morning, Sarah solemnly announced to the first graders that on Saturday at 12 o'clock, everyone was invited to a tea party. Yay, the children shouted. After listening to the words of gratitude after the tea party, Sarah decided that it was not worth stopping. She was sure to come up with something new and no less interesting for her students. The young teacher had no idea what passions were playing out around her. Selena was making a work plan for October. I think I should take a little break, she thought, her mind racing. The kettle boiled, and the principal went to the cupboard. It seemed that there were some quite edible croissants left over from yesterday. There was a knock at the door. "Come in," replied the director with a note of doom. Victoria, an elementary school teacher, stood on the doorstep. "Selena, do you have a moment?" she asked in a begrudging way. The principal sighed. Frankly, she didn't like this person. Slippery, vulgar. But a good manager shouldn't show his personal attitude to his subordinate. "Yes, of course," Celine spoke calmly, "listening to you. I wanted to ask you, how do you feel about the new elementary school teacher?" "Sarah," the principal clarified. "Yes" to her. Selena frowned. Oh, this visit was not a good thing. But since the question had already been asked, it had to be answered, and so she answered it. "Well, how I feel about her is irrelevant, but since it's so important to you, I think Sarah's a good girl, and she'll make a great teacher in time. Is that it?" "Well, I don't know how to tell you this. As it is, say so." The director shrugged and added, no longer trying to hide her irritation, "Victoria, I really don't have much time. So if you really have something to say, say it. If you don't, you can close the door on the back side." "I was going to say that Sarah was flirting with the gym teacher," Victoria blurted out. "But that's unacceptable. Wouldn't you agree?" "Really?" grinned the director. "I have a completely different piece of information." "Yeah, but also, the tea party is." Victoria suddenly felt like a schoolgirl who had come to tell on a classmate, and she was angry with herself. She regretted coming here, but there was no retreat. What did the tea party have to do with it? Selena asked, perplexed. She knew exactly what this poisonous, and as it turned out, jealous lady had in mind. But to use the leadership in her intrigues? No, that was out of line. "He who wants results allows means," Celine mentally quoted the classic. "And in love and war all means are good. But is it love or war? I think it's the latter. But maybe I can prevent a war." "I'll tell you what, Victoria," said the principal tiredly. "It's not right for a teacher to gossip like an old woman, let alone try to involve me in it. It's low and immoral. Well, morality is not for you. And it seems that you judge others from your own bell tower too." "But I'm not at all. I'm not done yet." She raised her hand. "You want to outdo Sarah? Go for it. At least organize the same tea party. I'll let you in on a secret. The parents loved it. Children need to be socialized, and you, as a teacher, should understand that. And another thing, it's not my policy to single anyone out, but if I find out that you're poisoning this girl, I'll give you a life. Any questions?" "No," Victoria muttered dejectedly. "That's fine. Go to work." After the teacher left the room, Celine immediately felt like using an air freshener. This is so gross. And such people go to work in schools, the woman thought sadly. For what? And what did she expect when she came to me? Victoria's visit threw the director off balance, but Selena Vladimirovna had a work plan waiting for her. A couple of hours later, another conversation about Sarah took place in the school. But it wasn't as emotional, but it was more savory. John and 3 other 11th graders who were friendly with him were drinking in the gym teacher's office. Actually, they could get a lot of trouble for that kind of misbehavior, but if you did it smartly, it would all be covered. The boys won't tell anyone, and the principal left an hour ago. John checked it out himself. "Guys, we got a case," he started talking. "A delicate one." "Delicate?" Arthur asked curiously. "And how delicate?" inquired Tom. "I'm going to give you the gist of it," John said in a businesslike manner, "and you can judge for yourself how delicate it is. Anyway, I like the new elementary school teacher. I approach her this way and that, but she doesn't notice me." "Yeah," Arthur said. "Well, what do we have to do?" "I want to look like a hero in her eyes, and you're going to help me with that," the gym teacher smiled. John's plan was as follows. His high school friends lure Sarah into the locker room and start hitting on her. Well, like a true gentleman, he saves the lady of his heart. Naturally, I owe you one, John summarized. I'm not going to do that. Nicholas, who had been silent until now, exclaimed, Is it okay if it's attempted rape? And that's a criminal offense. I don't want to start my adult life in jail. Indeed, John, Arthur agreed with his comrade. You've gone a little overboard. It's going to be fine. John said with conviction. It only seems risky at first glance. There's no risk at all. Yes. Tom grinned incredulously. We don't think so. Maybe we don't understand something though. That's just it. John was eager to confirm. First of all, you don't have to do anything. I don't have to do anything. For one thing, you don't have to do anything. Favorite girl, Nicholas grinned. Well, you don't have to tell us. The main thing is that there won't be any action on your part. And then, it's unlikely that Sarah will give this case a go. Think about it. Does she need to? She's been working here a week, and it's not like her to embarrass herself like this. I mean, the gossip's gonna start. Oh, and Victoria's bound to chime in, he thought with a chuckle. But John didn't even realize that the most interesting part of their conversation had been overheard and even recorded. The conversation with the principal had thrown both parties off balance. The teachers left the teacher's room, but Victoria remained seated, staring at one point. Alas, the conversation with the principal had not produced the result she had hoped for. I've had happiness thrust upon my head, resented Victoria. It's either me or her. Except what to do. Victoria looked at her watch, took a deep breath, changed her shoes, and took her coat off the coat rack. She left the teacher's lounge, but when she heard voices from the direction of the gym, she headed that way. No other way than with her, thought Victoria in a rage, and trying not to clack her heels, snuck to the door of her lover's office. I'm going to sketch the gist of it now. She heard John's voice, and how delicate, judge for yourself. Anyway, I like my new elementary school teacher. I approach her this way and that, but she doesn't notice me. No, not with her, Victoria rejoiced. There's obviously something more interesting going on here. Holding her breath, she pulled out her smartphone and turned on the recorder, and just in time. John outlined his plan, and there was a brief pause. I won't sign up for that. The silence was broken by the voice of one of the seniors, whom Victoria called his henchman. Is it okay if it's attempted rape? And that's a felony. The scheming teacher just couldn't believe her luck. Victoria didn't know what to do with the tape, but she felt it would serve her well. The main thing was to think it over carefully. I like her, one of the guys said in a playful voice. Such a cute little baby girl. I love them. Keep it down. There came John's warning voice. It's mine. Victoria clenched her fists, completely unable to feel her sharp nails digging into her skin. Well, let's say we agree, said one of the guys. Let's say. But how do we do it? How do we get that Sarah of yours into the locker room? The fall prom is in a week, and Sarah will be the teacher on duty that week. One of you will call her into the locker room to say something's wrong, and then the next thing you know. Deciding that was enough, the schemer walked out of the gym. Victoria took a perfumed bath and wondered what she should do with the tape. The teacher was honestly trying to figure out what she wanted to do to weaken a hated rival, or to prevent John from such dubious heroism. Both, Victoria thought. Why? She could hold John off. The boys could do their thing. Youth, hormones, and Sarah, by the way, is pretty and fresh. The seniors can't resist, and then Sarah's gonna be embarrassed. There's nothing left for her to do but resign. How about we make it look like she wanted it to happen? John wouldn't admit he put the guys up to it, or he'd be in trouble, Victoria thought. But no, that's a fantasy. I don't think anyone's going to believe it. The other option was to let Sarah listen to the tape. Or better yet, threaten John that she would do it. But after a second, Victoria rejected both. In the first case, Sarah would undoubtedly be grateful to her, but Victoria didn't need her gratitude any more than a fish needs an umbrella. Well, by blackmailing John, Victoria would make an enemy, that's all. Screw it, she thought, drying herself off with a big fluffy towel. I'll act on circumstances. The autumn ball was always eagerly awaited. It was a large-scale event, which, like the New Year's tree, was organized in 3 streams for elementary school, middle school, and high school students. The next week promised to be a busy one. Sarah had to be the teacher on duty, which I think I can handle it, Sarah replied. That's fine, nodded the vice principal, and winked at her. Yes, smiled the girl. The fall ball was scheduled for 6 o'clock in the evening. At 17:45, the hall and the corridor were crowded with dressed-up teachers and school children. Both were chatting merrily in anticipation of a fun celebration. Many took pictures. Duty is duty. But on the occasion of the fall ball, Sarah had bought a chic outfit, a coffee and milk-coloured tea pantsuit. The elegant suit beautifully set off her brown eyes and hair the colour of ripe wheat, gathered in a high, intricate hairstyle. Flesh-coloured shoes on a massive platform and stiletto heels made the girl taller. What can I say? She was good. You look great, complimented John. You should be on the cover of a fashion magazine, not a party girl. Is it just me, or are his eyes running strangely? Thought Sarah, feeling a slight prick of misgiving. She tried to chase the bad thoughts away, but she wasn't very good at it. I seem to be getting paranoid, the duty teacher stated ironically. Well, what could possibly go wrong? The concert was very interesting, and Sarah, forgetting her misgivings, laughed at the funny numbers, applauded the artists heartily, and encouraged them. A tall, handsome boy came up to her. He seemed to be in the 11th grade. Excuse me, are you the teacher on duty? The guy asked. Yes, nodded Sarah. Is something wrong? You could say that. Over there by the locker room. Yeah, sure. I'll be right back. She reached the locker room, but seeing nothing suspicious, she looked questioningly at the guy. What's the matter? Sarah asked, perplexed, beginning to realize that her misgivings had not deceived her. The teacher on duty wanted to go back to the hall, but the boy unceremoniously pushed Sarah into the locker room, where she was horrified to find 2 more men. One of them had closed the locker room from the inside. What do you want from me? The girl asked fearfully. It wasn't hard to guess, but Sarah refused to believe it. Not here, where anyone could have entered. The guys didn't say anything back, just sniffled and pulled their hands toward her, pushing each other away. The guys smelled strongly of perfume, but even that didn't overpower the alcoholic odor. That makes sense, Sarah thought. They're drunk, so they've got the urge to do something. The girl broke free of the disgusting embrace and screamed as loud as she could. Help! One of the guys made an attempt to clamp the girl's mouth shut, but the wrong guy attacked. Sarah bit him and shoved him away sharply. You scum, hissed the high school student. Well, now I'll count all your teeth. Help, screamed Sarah again at the top of her voice. Julia, the school janitor, didn't like holidays. The shouting, the noise, the noise, the noise, and then you have to clean up after them. It was no secret to the old woman that the students and quite well-behaved looking female students were not averse to having a beer, wine, or even something stronger in a secluded corner. It was a young thing, of course, but the prospect of cleaning up their vomit didn't appeal to them. But this time, it looks like something really out of the ordinary happened. It's not every day you hear cries for help, not on school grounds. So well dozed off, thought Julia grudgingly. The elderly cleaning lady liked to take a nap in the building, waiting for the end of a disco or a teacher's corporate party. But apparently, this time it was not to be. Armed with a mop and bucket just in case, Julia headed toward the locker room, where a woman's scream was coming from. The old woman ran briskly to the hall and, knocking on the locker room, asked sternly, "What's going on here?" Help, please." She heard a pleading female voice say, and the locker room door swung open. To Julia's amazement, the new elementary school teacher came out. She was sobbing and shamefully covering her torn blouse with her hands and a black eye. "Oh my God!" exclaimed the old woman, and without thinking long enough, she kicked the first person who came to hand in the head. "For what?" asked Tom with a hiccup. "Not enough," exclaimed the cleaning lady. "I would have added more, but now everybody's so gentle. Anything goes straight to complaining. And what are you doing, you wicked? And don't think you'll get away with it." Footsteps were heard from the direction of the assembly hall. The holiday concert went on as usual. John sat closer to the exit, and Victoria sat nearby. After a while, the gym teacher left the hall, and she followed him. "Don't like the concert?" Victoria asked with a smile. "Why not?" shrugged John. "The concert is quite decent. Just a headache." "Clearly," Victoria coquettishly mouthed, fixing her hair. Shouting was heard from the direction of the locker room. "Victoria, didn't you hear anything?" the PE teacher asked. "No," she replied nonchalantly. "But someone's screaming." John wouldn't give up. "What's the dookie teacher for?" "That's the thing. That's what she's yelling." "Oh, come on. Not a little girl," Victoria pointed out. "Victoria, it's her first time on duty, and on a holiday. Sarah's a new person." John exclaimed. "You're such a..." Unable, apparently, to find the words, the gym teacher strode toward the hall. "John, what else?" John asked, annoyed. "Don't you realize that Sarah might need help? And anyway, stop hanging on to me. You're cheap. Do you get it? You're cheap." John quickened his pace, but Victoria kept up. "What do you want from me?" the gym teacher exclaimed, turning around and stabbing her ex-girlfriend in the eye. She argued and covered her face with her hands. "Did you get it?" quipped John and staggered onward. "Got it?" Victoria thought, "but he who has the last laugh." And she, anticipating a big show, hurried after John. The gym teacher was in a fighting mood. Well, now he would prove to Sarah that he was a worthwhile option, and then... There, she stopped the enemy. Julia proclaimed triumphantly when she saw John and Victoria. John was stunned. When he realized that his plan had failed miserably, the gym teacher slumped helplessly into one of the chairs. "I called the police too," the older woman said, and John finally snickered. Victoria looked at him with interest, and it was a truly pathetic sight, isn't it? The gym teacher tried to say something, but didn't finish. The quiet boys stood aside. Law enforcement officers arrived about 15 minutes later. "So, what happened?" asked already in the office, courtesy of Selena, the investigator. Sarah and Julia told it like it was. "Attempted rape?" suggested one of the staff. "No," Nicholas exclaimed. "We had no intention of, raping her." "And what were your thoughts then?" asked the investigator. "I'd be glad to hear your version." "All the more so, guys, you understand. This is a serious matter." The guys understood. "So this, we are not ourselves," hesitantly began Artur Tikhonov. "Yes," Tom confirmed. There was a knock at the door. "May I?" Victoria asked. "I have important information about the case. The boys really had nothing to do with it. It's a real mystery." The policeman splashed his hands. "Well, not exactly nothing to do with it," the teacher clarified. "But, by the way, what happened to your eye?" The investigator asked mockingly and added with a chuckle, "Were you also, tried to be raped?" "No, I was not attempted rape," replied the teacher, "but let's get on with it. I have a tape recording that proves the innocence of these guys." "Well, play your tape." "Wow," Selena exclaimed. "This school is a hotbed of organized crime." "Yugu," nodded the investigator. "Well, then invite the organizer of the crime." The principal stepped out into the hallway and asked one of the crowd of curious people to get John. "And he's nowhere to be found," someone said. "Then find it." There was no way for him to leave, An employee was standing at the entrance, the investigator noted. "Well, we'll wait," sighed the policeman. "It's a montage," exclaimed John indignantly when he was presented with the tape recorder. "Yes, she was hitting on me, and when I blew her off, she decided to get revenge." "Well, the examination will show whether it's a montage or not," the investigator grinned. "In the meantime, I have a question for Victoria. Did he do the black eye too?" "Yes," she nodded. "Because she was hanging all over me," shouted John. "So you don't deny it?" "She was hanging all over me." "You're such a shit," Victoria said contemptuously, "and you can't take responsibility for your actions." At that moment, Sarah suddenly felt sympathy for Victoria. What a human being, she thought of her colleague. But that was just the beginning. "Sarah, I'm sorry," Victoria said as they stepped out into the hallway. "Stupid. Anyway, I'm sorry if you can." "Already forgiven," Sarah smiled. "You're really good." Celine was of the same opinion. "Come on." Victoria was a little embarrassed. "What did I do?" "It would be awful if the guys were brought in for nothing." "Yes." The principal shook her head and turned to Sarah. "How are you?" "It's fine now," she replied. "Are you sure?" "Selena, why don't I take Sarah's shift?" Victoria suggested. "What's her shift now?" "Well, I'm all for it." The principal nodded. "Sarah, really go home. I'll call you a cab right now." "Thank you very much." She thanked her colleagues. A couple minutes later, the police officers brought John out of the principal's office, handcuffed. John gave Victoria a hateful look, but she defiantly turned away. "I'm releasing the guys on their own recognizance," said the investigator, "but your employee will have to come with us." The phone rang from the teacher's lounge. "Sarah, the cab's pulling up," the principal shouted. Looking out the window, the girl did see a car with a lighted checker. "Well, I'm off," she said to Victoria with a smile-happy detachment. "Good night." As Sarah settled into the back seat of the car, she suddenly heard, "Good evening, Sarah." "Good evening," she replied confusedly, and recognizing Mickey, her student's father, as the driver, smiled warmly. "Good evening, Mickey." Sarah fell silent, remembering the man's middle name. "Mickey," he smiled, correctly interpreting the girl's silence. "I thought you had another job," Sarah said, remembering that Mickey's parents' information had listed him as a sysadmin at a bank. The man confirmed. "I work part-time here. That's what a single parent does. It's what I do." "You're a wonderful father," the teacher smiled. "Cindy's been talking about you for years. You wouldn't believe it, about you too," laughed Mickey. "Oh, really? Seriously? And what did Cindy say about me? Unless, of course, it's a secret." "No," he shrugged. "Cindy said you were a good teacher and a good person." "Well, that's good to hear." In truth, Cindy had said something else, but Mickey didn't want to say anything about that, so he moved on to another topic. When Mickey met Catherine, he felt like the happiest man in the world. 6 months later, the young people decided to get married. A month later, Ekaterina proudly told Mickey that she was expecting a child. "Catherine, I adore you," exclaimed the happy father-to-be. "And I you." The young woman smiled gently at her husband, and then Cindy was born, and the young parents happily immersed themselves in caring for their baby girl. The daughter was 2 years old when Catherine became pregnant again. Mickey really wanted a son, and God heard him. The ultrasound showed that they were having a boy. It seemed that happiness would last forever. The pregnancy was difficult, and Ekaterina began to have serious health problems. Doctors unanimously insisted on terminating the pregnancy, but the future mother did not want to hear about it. After all, the child was already living, breathing, with a beating heart. The labor started early. "Prepare for the worst," the doctor said, and still Mickey hoped for a miracle. But alas, newborn Robert's first cry coincided with his mother's last breath. Catherine was only 25. The baby was born weak and was placed in a cuvette. 2 days later, on the day of Catherine's funeral, his little heart stopped beating. He must have sensed that his mother was being escorted to her final journey, Catherine's inconsolable mother said bitterly. After losing his wife and son, Mickey became distraught with grief. When he learned that his son was gone, the young widower went to church and placed candles for the repose of Catherine and Robert. Then he approached the face of Jesus. "Why?" Mickey asked desperately. "Why did you do this to me? Why did you take Catherine away from me so soon? Why did you take the baby away from me?" "God sends a man as many trials as he can bear," someone behind him said quietly. The man turned around and saw the priest. "Yeah, but it's so cruel." Mickey shook his head. "I'm a widower with a 3-year-old daughter in my arms. My wife wanted to give me a son, and she bore him at great risk to her health. And today, Robert was gone." And the widower wept bitterly. "You have someone to live for, my son," the priest said affectionately, and added, crossing Mickey, "Go to your daughter. She's waiting for you." Cindy asked when Mommy and her little brother were coming. That same day, Mickey explained to the girl that they were in heaven. "Will they come to visit?" the little girl asked, her eyes wide open, and her father envied her heartily. After all, in the incomplete 3 years of age, a person is not able to realize and accept that the person is no longer there and will never be. Therefore, grief as such is not felt. "No, they won't be able to come visit," sighed Mickey. "Do we go to them?" asked the daughter. "Yes, Cindy, one day we will meet them, and we'll be together. Hopefully that won't happen for a while yet," Mickey thought bitterly. Although, from now on, he had to learn to live without Catherine and the son he had been waiting for. It wasn't easy, but Mickey managed, because he had the powerful incentive of a young daughter, Cindy, his princess. Mickey worked as a system administrator in a bank and earned a good living. But he wanted his daughter to have the best of everything, so he went to work as a taxi driver. My daughter grew up to be a smart girl, and with every day by day, she became more and more like Catherine. She pleased her daddy as best she could. Cindy enjoyed participating in the kindergarten matinees, drawing them together and signing each family portrait, May and my favorite daddy. The girl learned to read at the age of 5, and every night she read poems and fairy tales to Mickey. Cindy did her chores playfully, which delighted the adults. Catherine, too, learned early to do all the housework, Grandma Leslie said one day, and the eyes of the poor woman who had buried her daughter filled with tears. When Cindy went to school, she suddenly started asking her father if he wanted to get married. "What?" stunned Mickey. "Why the sudden question?" "It's just that one day Grandma Leslie said you're still young, and you need a woman," the daughter explained. He nodded. "I see then. Maybe Cindy fears that I'll get married, have a baby, and I'll love her less," suggested Mickey, and hurried to reassure his daughter. "I'm certainly not planning on it anytime soon. I mean, we're good together, right?" The daughter's answer struck a nerve. "Okay," nodded Cindy, "but I wish I had a mom. Our teacher, Sarah, is so nice and beautiful. I wish I had a mom like that." Mickey remembered a short young woman with long hair the color of ripe wheat and kind eyes, like Catherine's. "She's really pretty," he thought suddenly. When Mickey arrived at the tea party, he realized he was missing. This was the kind of woman he wanted to live his life with. Sarah's soft voice was mesmerizing and enveloping, and as she poured tea from the large samovar, Mickey's breath caught. It looked so homely. Unexpectedly, the man imagined how he and this beauty was sitting on the terrace of his country house and drinking tea from the samovar. "Well, aren't you an idiot?" Mentally, he scolded himself. "Sarah is my daughter's teacher, and besides, such an attractive woman must have someone else." No matter how hard Mickey tried not to think about her, the kind, smiling face with the radiant brown eyes kept popping up in front of his eyes. And when he saw Sarah when he took a cab to her daughter's school, his legs suddenly felt suspiciously woozy. A stray thought suddenly flashed through his mind. What if it's fate? As they drove and chatted about everything, Mickey felt as if he and the woman had known each other for years. They hadn't. It seemed to him that it wasn't the first time they'd been in his Renault, and Sarah wasn't in the car as a passenger. As a spouse, Mickey thought, and the thought gave him unparalleled pleasure. "There's my house," Sarah pointed to a blocky 9-story snake building. Mickey hated to part with the charming passenger, but he couldn't help it. Being a man who could make the best out of any situation, he remembered that he had Sarah's cell phone number, and now he knew where she lived. Isn't that something to be happy about? In the morning, when Mickey went to the car wash, he found thin velvet gloves in the car. Friday night is a hot time, and a lot of women have traveled in the car, including women who have been drinking. They tend to forget their cell phones, bank cards, and everything else in the cab. But Mickey was somehow sure that the gloves belonged to Sarah. Anyway, it was easy to check. While the young washerwoman finished Mickey's iron horse to a mirror shine, he dialed the number of his daughter's teacher. "Hello," he heard a soft, melodic, and so welcome voice. "Good morning, Sarah," he muttered with a smile. "Hello," she replied politely. "Here's the thing. Anyway, I found these beige velvet gloves in the car. These wouldn't happen to be yours, would they?" "It's very possible. There are some. But I'll have a look." Mickey prayed to God that Sarah would turn out to be the owner of the gloves, and he heard him. "Yes," said the girl. "All right," Mickey didn't fudge a bit. "So here's what we'll do. I'll come over in an hour, or a little later, and give you your stuff." "All right, it's a deal." After waiting for the car to be washed, Mickey drove to the house where the lady of his heart lived. "I'm dreaming, you idiot," he told himself. When Mickey pulled up, he dialed Sarah's number. "I'm in position," he said. "Well and fine," replied the girl cheerfully. "Go up to the 45th apartment. We'll have tea." "Is it comfortable?" Hesitating slightly, Mickey asked. "Well, if I'm offering it, it's convenient," laughed Sarah. "I should thank you somehow." "Looks like the lady is free," he thought gleefully. He should not, however, have jumped to conclusions. What could be the matter? What if Sarah wanted revenge on her lover, or even on her husband? Mickey got out of the car, but he didn't go to the driveway, but to a small store on the side of the house. He bought a small cake, a bunch of bananas, and a box of candy. As he left the store, Mickey saw a flower stand. "Just what we need," he thought contentedly, and walked resolutely toward the kiosk. After buying a pretty bouquet of roses, complete with small white florets, Mickey strode into the driveway. Sarah was setting the table for tea, but for some reason everything was falling apart, and the guest had disappeared. The girl caught herself thinking that it would have been nice if he hadn't come at all. And to hell with the gloves. Not much value. But just as Sarah was finishing the thought, the doorbell rang and she ran to open it. Mickey stood on the doorstep with a cake, a bouquet of roses, and a bag. "This is for you," he said with a smile, holding out a bouquet of roses to Sarah. "Thank you," the girl smiled back. "It's a very beautiful bouquet. Come into the kitchen." "Oh well, you shouldn't have spent so much," exclaimed Sarah as Mickey pulled candy and bananas out of the bag. "Of course you should have," he objected. "It is a crime to go to such a beautiful woman empty-handed." They sat down to tea, but the conversation was not going well. They were both too excited and didn't know what to say. "Do you live alone?" Mickey broke the silence. "With her parents," she replied, though they were away at the moment. "Did you go on vacation?" "No, a symposium. They are not ordinary doctors, but PhDs." "Oh, how?" He stretched out respectfully. "Cool." "I don't know," Sarah shrugged, but I hadn't really thought about it. Maybe because I've been living with it since I was a kid. "Who are your parents?" "My dad's a trolley driver. My mum works in a bakery." "Sarah, can I ask you a question?" "Yes, of course." "I apologize wildly, but is it a fashion to put the dress, on the wrong side?" Looking around herself, The girl saw that she had indeed worn her house dress inside out and blushed like a cancer. "How good she is when she blushes," thought Mickey admiringly. "I'll change now," she said, apologizing. "For what?" inquired the guest. "Well, I don't know." Suddenly both of them laughed merrily. "You know, it looks good on you," Mickey said with a laugh. "Really?" smiled Sarah. "I'll change anyway. I'll be right back." "Don't?" Mickey asked, and sitting down beside Sarah, pulled the girl to him and kissed her, shyly and hesitantly at first, like a seventh grader, and then bolder. Sarah snuggled up to him, as if this wasn't the first time she'd kissed him. She breathed in the scent of Mickey's perfume, and she felt better than she'd ever felt in her life. "Isn't this the good fiancé Grandma was talking about?" It flashed through her mind, because it all fits. "Sarah," whispered Mickey, "you're my good, beautiful, desirable." It sounded so intimate that the girl was frightened. "It doesn't add up," she besought herself. "By the way, he is the father of a pupil, and I am behaving, not like a teacher, but like a straight girl." Sarah resolutely released herself from Mickey's embrace and nervously ogled herself. "Sorry, those," he muttered. "Yeah, I shouldn't have." "It's okay," the girl muttered. I'll go change the dress." "Yeah, sure." Sarah walked out of the kitchen and went to change her dress. "I seem to have lost my head," she mentally stated, "for good." And Mickey suddenly pictured Sarah changing her dress. His throat went dry, and he realized that he could barely contain himself from following her, and if Mickey did, he'd be in trouble. He sipped his cool tea and was relieved when he heard Sarah's footsteps. "More tea?" she'd offered, trying to act as if nothing had happened. "Ah, no thanks, I should probably go." They both remembered the purpose of their visit in the hallway when Sarah came out to see them off. Mickey reached into his pocket and pulled out his gloves. "I almost forgot," he smiled. "Then you'd have to go back," Sarah remarked. "Yes," Mickey whispered, and without realizing what he was doing, he started kissing the girl. She didn't think to resist, but the ringing of the doorbell brought them both to their senses. Sarah opened the door and, after saying goodbye to her guest, let Angelica in. However, commented her friend on what she had seen. "Let's go to the kitchen," Sarah tossed. Noticing the signs of a feast, Angelica said, "I see you're not wasting any time." "Oh, it's nothing." Sarah waved her hand. "It was just a cab driver. I'd left my gloves in the car, and he brought them back. So I thought I'd thank him." "Thank you?" Angelica asked ironically. "Thank you," she nodded, served him tea, and gave me a passionate kiss. "What makes you say that?" "Oh, Sarah, I've known you too long to be wrong about anything. Your freaky look alone is enough." And the disheveled hair, the puffy lips, she winked. "Angelica." "Angelica what?" "I've been Angelique for 23 years, but I'll shut up. And if you give me tea with raspberry sprigs according to your grandmother's recipe, I'll be as quiet as a fish." "Don't be silent like a fish," Sarah smiled, "but I'll give you tea. I'll even give you a piece of cake. That's what I mean." Angelica exclaimed approvingly and settled into the spot where Mickey had been sitting the other day, until he started kissing her. "So you have something with him?" Angelica asked. "Pardon my curiosity, of course, but I'm allowed to." "I don't have anything with him," Sarah sighed. "But you wouldn't mind?" "Oh, Angelica, I think I'm in love to the very cannot," she admitted. "But there are some not that the obstacle, but—" "Sarah, my head is spinning. I haven't seen you in a few days, and you're having the time of your life." "It sure does." Sarah nodded and told her friend about what had happened at the fall ball. "That's news," Angelica marveled. "The genie has been detained." "Yes. Serves him right. He won't litter the wonderful atmosphere of the biker club with his rotten person. We say hello to you, by the way." "Thank you, them too." "By the way, would you like to come over today?" "Why wouldn't it be?" "That's great. And bring your boyfriend with you." "What kind of boyfriend is he to me?" "Well, not a boyfriend, it will be. Angelica said with a shrug, but something tells me it's only a matter of time. And as you know, I'm almost never wrong. And I've never been so passionate that you weren't wrong this time either, Sarah said quietly. It's gonna be fine. Well, the fact that he's your student's father is no big deal. But it's like, immoral, you mean? For the life of me, I don't see anything immoral about it. Where there's true love, there's nothing immoral. And I'm sure that's the case here. There's a reason you haven't needed anyone for so many years. The friends sat around for a couple more hours and then went to a biker club in the evening. Sarah felt like she belonged this time, and it was a great feeling. She had been given the nickname B. You have honey-colored hair, Chippy noted, so I think the nickname B is just right. Why? Smiled Sarah. I like it a lot. You know, Sarah, I actually called you here for a reason. Angelica smiled slyly and turned to her lover. Chippy. What? Nothing, she pouted. Do I have to? Well, I'm sorry, said Chippy, who, as it turned out, was called Victor. Angelica's boyfriend's last name was Chipovsky, hence the pseudonym. All right, brothers and sisters, Chippy proclaimed, Cindy and I have decided to get married. Everyone is invited to the wedding. The club's regulars applauded wildly, and then the exclamations began. Well done. That's news. Cool. Love and advice. You guys are such a great couple. Bitter. When the excitement around the upcoming marriage had died down a little, Angelica remembered John, better known in the club as Jeannie. When they heard that John had been detained, the club members unanimously decided that he should go to jail. They didn't get home until morning. Sarah fell asleep with her head barely touching the pillow. On Monday, she learned that John was facing jail time in all seriousness. What can I say? Shrugged Sarah, wanting to show himself as a hero. He ended up showing his true colors. I couldn't have said it better, Victoria approved. God, I was such a fool. Clinging to an illusion. Come on, said Sarah. We all make mistakes, and you are no exception. Sarah, why don't we go you? A co-worker suggested it. I'd love to, she replied sincerely. From that date on, the colleagues became good friends. Victoria was only 2 years older than Sarah, so it was not surprising that they had a lot in common. After work, they'd go to the same cafe, where John had tried to invite Sarah, and sometimes they'd go shopping. And when she finally moved into her grandparents' apartment, Victoria went shopping with her and helped her pick out dishes, linens, and decorative details that were pleasing to a woman's heart. Victoria, I have a favor to ask of you, she said on the eve of Angelica's wedding. And what's the request? My high school friend is getting married the day after tomorrow, and I haven't picked out an outfit. Why don't you help me? No problem, Victoria smiled. I'll freshen up my closet. In the end, with joint efforts, the girls chose an elegant, shimmering wine-colored dress. It should be matched with matching shoes, a friend remarked. I think so too, Sarah said sadly, but there's no money. And it's still a week away from payday. I can borrow it, Victoria said. It's kind of embarrassing. Stop it. It's uncomfortable sleeping on the ceiling. The blanket falls down. You'll give it back when you can. I assure you, you won't embarrass me. I've got a darling who's given me some money. Sarah knew that her friend was dating a wealthy man twice her age. According to her friend, the man was divorced. Maybe I should borrow money from Victoria if she's offering, thought Sarah. Then I'll be very grateful, she said. That's a good girl. You see, she's uncomfortable. The wedding of Angelica and Victor, aka Cindy and Chippy, was being celebrated in a rented mansion that had once been a merchant's estate. Wow, thought Sarah when her friend told her where the wedding would be. That's a lot of money. But as it turned out, Chippy could afford more than that. He was a successful computer programmer. As Sarah and the rest of the guests left the registry office, she was called out. At first, Sarah thought she was hallucinating. The voice that called out to her sounded suspiciously like Mickey's. Sarah. A voice called out, and she turned around. Hallucinations were out of the question. Osipov was very real. And there was a smiling and dressed-up Cindy standing next to him. "Sarah, do you know Uncle Victor too?" the student asked. "I know a little," she nodded with a smile, "and I'm actually a friend of his fiancée." "Are you a friend of Uncle Victor's fiancée?" Cindy was pleased. Yeah. After that meeting, Sarah and Mickey had been strictly business. She thought it was for the best, but at night she wanted to howl. And now, Mickey stood in front of Sarah and looked at her fondly. This is really fate, she thought, not even realizing that her lover was thinking the same thing. The marriage party approached them. "Is everything all right?" Angelica asked. "I see you've already met my brother." With a smile, the groom turned to Sarah and winked at her. "By the way, he's free." "He's your brother?" the friends exclaimed in unison. "Well, yes," shrugged the happy newlywed with a smile. "Why?" "Come on," Angelica said, and the newlyweds went to the wedding limousine. "Sarah, Mickey, I'll see you at the mansion," Victor said. "Do you remember her?" Sarah asked. "Honestly, no," shook his head Mickey, "but should he?" "You bumped into her at the door that day." Okay. How are you guys doing?" "Okay," nodded the girl, having moved to a new apartment not too long ago. "You bought an apartment. What's the money for?" she asked with a chuckle. "I don't know. I hear they give teachers some kind of preferential housing." "Maybe. But I've only been working at the school for 2 months, so it's out of the question for now." "Daddy, can I take a picture with the bride and groom?" asked Cindy. "Go," replied the father with a laugh, and when the girl had withdrawn to a respectful distance, confessed, "I've often thought of you and remembered our kisses." "Mickey, don't. You have to." "During that time, I realized I didn't need anyone else. And maybe I'm being presumptuous, but I can't believe you haven't thought of me." "But Cindy..." "Sarah, when I said that Cindy was bugging me about you, there was one thing I didn't mention." Mickey held a meaningful pause, and Sarah, realizing she was about to hear something important, didn't interrupt. "Cindy said she wished she had a mom like you." She was so stunned she didn't even notice the bride, groom, and Cindy beside her. "And you're still on you?" exclaimed Angelica in amazement and laughed. "We need to fix this right away." "That's easy," smiled Mickey. "Sarah, are you really going to be my mom?" Cindy asked. "Well, it's too early to talk about that," the teacher smiled. "Well, I think it's just right," said the bride. "The main thing is, try to catch the bouquet." "Well, now let's mount up. I'm as hungry as 100 wolves." "Well, I don't know, Sarah," Victoria said. "I don't think anyone would judge you. When two people love each other, it doesn't matter who is who or who is who. And Selena is a wise and understanding woman, and she'll be happy for you." Sarah had been dating Mickey for a month and was afraid that her co-workers would find out about their relationship. However, Victoria, like Angelique, assured her that there was nothing awful about it. "You haven't been in the smoking room today," Sarah said. "And I'm not allowed to now," my friend smiled. "Victoria, is that what I think it is?" Victoria nodded and her eyes brightened. "And Harvey, as soon as he found out, proposed to me." "That's great. I'm so happy for you," Sarah exclaimed and hugged her friend. "When are you?" "No marriage proposal has been made yet," she said. "I'm sure it will," Victoria assured him. It was a few days after the conversation between the friends. Mickey came to see Sarah and told her that he had been offered a good place in the capital. Career prospects with all that entails, the lover told her, and Sarah's heart snapped. "What about me?" "Sarah, will you come to Washington with me?" Mickey asked. "And as what?" "What do you mean, who?" He snorted. "As my wife, of course. Sarah, marry me." Saying these words, Mickey got down on one knee and pulled a cherished red velvet box out of his sweater pocket. "Yes," replied the girl, and tears of happiness spurted from her eyes. "It's been a year. Remembering how Catherine's second pregnancy had ended, Mickey was very worried. Since the day Sarah had informed him of her pregnancy, he had forbidden his wife to lift anything heavier than a kitten and had been blowing dust off her. Despite his mother-in-law's assurances that the pregnancy was progressing perfectly and that there were no unpleasant surprises, Mickey was afraid. "I wouldn't survive if something happened to you and the baby," he said. But everything went perfectly, and on New Year's Eve, Mickey and Sarah became parents of an adorable, sturdy baby boy, whom they named Sam. On January 6, Mickey picked up his wife and son from the maternity hospital. They celebrated their first Christmas in the capital in a close family circle: Mickey, Sarah, and Cindy, who was delighted with her little brother. The baby was sleeping serenely in his crib, and the girl did not leave his side. It was very touching. "Cindy seems to enjoy being a big sister," the young mother remarked. "And that's great," my husband whispered with a smile, "because we're going to have more kids, right? What about it?" Sarah smiled gently at him, and Cindy would be an example to them in all things. The couple laughed quietly and clinked glasses of baby champagne, which Mickey drank in solidarity with his wife. They both knew this year would be a happy one.